The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast. This is a show where I help you become an even more awesome driving instructor. And as always, I am your splendid host, Terry Cook. I'm delighted to be here, but even more delighted that you have chosen to listen because we are continuing our journey through Season 7, which is all around road safety and bridging the gap between driving instructors and the road safety sector. And Season 7 is sponsored by Bright Coaching. So to find out more and to see what they have to offer, head over to brightcoaching.net and make sure you're signing up to the newsletter, which again, you can find at brightcoaching.net. But back to today's episode, because we've got another cracker for you today, and we're taking a slightly different approach because we're looking specifically at road safety campaigning. So something I'm trying to do throughout this season is look at different aspects of the road safety sector to see where we can get involved and where we can help. And, we've been looking at the technical side, we've looked at the emotional side so far, but today we're looking to see how we can actually campaign. Now, just to clarify, campaign doesn't mean marching out with placards and marching on the street. It can just be doing something small. But who better to join us to discuss that than possibly the most positive, prominent and lovely campaigner of them all, Sophie Lydon. Now, some of you may remember Sophie from a previous episode where we come on and spoke about garage anxiety. And that's kind of why I wanted to get Sophie on, because she has a similar feel to what we do. She works in garages, specifically with tyres, whereas we work specifically with learners. We work with safe road users, and Sophie works with safe vehicles. But she promotes so much more than that, and she embraces the whole community. And I think that's something we can take on board. We don't just have to promote safe road users. We can talk about all the stuff around that. So we get into that quite a lot today. But we also talk about the trouble she's had recently with her hire cars and as a result of a collision she's had. And I thought that massively applied to us, because I'm sure there's a lot of us that don't know a lot around, what to check for on basic maintenance. So, really interesting to actually show talking about some of the problems she's had with hire cars. But just before we get into this episode, this is usually a point where I ask you to go and click subscribe. But today, yes, I still want you to subscribe. But instead, I'm going to ask you to go and check out the website, www.theinstructorpodcast.com. Now, over there, you can find all the different ways to listen to the show. You can find all the other resources I have to offer, including other industry resources that aren't mine. There's a page over there dedicated to that. You can head to the blog page and find all the show notes and the links for each episode. And you can check out all the stuff for the Instructor Podcast Premium as well, so you can see what's available on the different tiers. And I would really love it if you signed up. It's a great way for you guys to get access to all this extra training, all this extra content for as little as £10 a month. It's also a great way for you to support the show and help me continue to bring you better and better content. But for now, let's get stuck into the show. So today on the Instructor Podcast, we are joined by the wonderful Sophie Lydon. How are we doing, Sophie?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad.
Good. Well, this season of the Instructor Podcast is all around road safety. And when I was creating this, I said to myself, how can you do a season on road safety and not have the amazing Sophie Lydon on? So I'm delighted to have you on today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
When I first invited you on, the big reason I wanted to get you on was to talk about your road safety campaigning, because I know a lot of instructors, one of the problems they face, or the challenges they face, they don't know where to start, they don't know where to find information, they don't know what to do, essentially. But since we arranged for you to come on, there's been a few incidents that I thought might be worth talking about, because you had a collision, someone collided into your car, which resulted in you getting a hire car, and you've had some problems with the hire cars. And as instructors, a lot of us use lease cars, and we have to get temporary cars, hire cars, stuff like that. So I thought that would be an interesting topic to begin with. So do you want to just start off by telling us the problems you've had with the hire cars?
So I've had 2 crashes in the past 6 months, all non-fault. A bus crashed into me. Well, I wasn't even in the car. It was just parked across from the garage, and it's just crashed into it and went down the side of it. So obviously left me having to get a hire car whilst my car was being fixed. Obviously, as somebody who is obsessed with tyres, knows everything about cars, when I went to go and pick the hire car up, I got in it to drive it away, and it came up with parking sensor safety default, but it wasn't just a quick wipe the sensors a bit dirty and it's going to work. It was literally a full default, which meant the car wasn't running properly. So I rang them and I said, there's something wrong with the car. And they said, oh, just bring it back. And then they gave me another car, which had been crashed into and had exactly the same damage as what my car had, and had rear tyres which were cracked and perished. But at this point, I was just like, oh my God, I just want a car to drive around in with the kids. So, this at the moment is kind of safe-ish, technically. And then fast forward to this week, where again, my car's been crashed into and I've been given a hire car, and they delivered the hire car. And as we were doing a quick walk round, noticed that the back driver's tyre was run flat. Not everybody would know what to look for a run flat tyre, but obviously I know. And even the staff who dropped it off had no idea. So when I spoke to them and I said, this tyre's clearly been run flat, you can see the ring around the sidewall of the tread. And they said, oh yeah, I think it had a puncture in the yard. It's probably just where we've driven it. Fix it. And I said, oh, has it been fixed properly, like with a puncture patch and everything? And they were like, no, it's just had a bit of that stuff put in it. And I was like, are you being serious? They were like, yeah, why? I was like, that's a temporary fix. You shouldn't drive any more than 50 miles in a temporary fix. And it's meant to get you to somewhere so that you can have a new tyre fitted. And they've driven up the motorway from Preston to Morecambe, which is about, I don't know, I think it's like 30-something miles, obviously at high speed, and put themselves at risk of a blowout. Then we're happy to give it to me to drive around with my children in the car. And then, I don't know, I'm in shock that we have hire companies who clearly do not know the basics of vehicle maintenance and tyre maintenance, which is something I constantly talk about and strive for better. But as somebody who maybe didn't know anything about road safety or anything about tyres, they would have just got in that car and not thought anything of it, and then could have had a blowout down the road. So yeah, I think I was just in shock that they gave me an technically legal car, unsafe car, and just expected me to drive around in it. And I've had no kind of email to say, we're really sorry this has happened, blah, blah, blah. All I've had is an apology off the staff who dropped the car off, which is technically not their fault because they're not the people who actually checked it. So yeah, I think they need to have their bums kicked, really.
I think it's scary because they're delivering that to you. Now, you said you're well out on this stuff. You know your stuff. So you're going to spot this stuff straight away. But to the average person, they're going to miss a lot of this stuff, aren't they?
Yeah. To the average person, realistically, it just looked like curbing damage. When someone's kind of driven down a curb and wiped off the pretty patterns on the sidewall.
Yeah.
But for me, I could tell straight away it was because the tyre's been compressed. So it had like the line, which is consistent all the way around. So I even said to them, I tell you what, we'll go over to the garage and I'll take it off and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And I don't think you're allowed to touch the cars or anything like that. So they just literally swapped it. But yeah, it's just a bit frustrating, really.
I think the thing I want to get across from my perspective here as a driving instructor is when I get a lease car, even like I say, if my lease car's off the road for a bit and I get a temporary car, my assumption is that car's going to be up to scratch. And I always have to almost fight my own instincts because I think, well, if I'm hiring a car from someone, they're going to bring me one that is in good condition. So my instinct is not to check it.
Yeah.
And I think would you kind of back me up there by saying that even if your instinct is not check it because you would assume that the car will be in good quality, that we should be taking time to have a proper check of the car whenever anyone brings it over?
100%. If you ever get a hire car or a lease car off anybody and even if you go and pick it up or drop it off, always make sure you do the walk around checks yourself. And if you don't know what that is, then I would say check for any damage on the car so that you can't be blamed when you give it back. Check for tyres, and that's not just tread and pressure, but that's tread, pressure and condition. So anything that's got cracks and perishes usually indicates an old tyre, which means that they've kind of neglected changing the tyres when they should have been. I check to make sure that your wipers work because we got given it was a Renault Kadjar the first time. The wipers were absolutely shot at. They didn't even work. Make sure you've got like screen wash, make sure the oil's okay. They might not let you check the oil whilst you're there, but it's always good to, check it. Just the basics, just to make sure that if you are putting your family or you're putting your or if you're putting your what do you students
Yes.
or if you're putting your students in there, then it's safe to be driven in and you aren't potentially going to have a crash at the fault of the hire company that you've trusted. So
It's interesting you say that because, I mean, I have to say wipers, I've never thought to check them on when you get the hire car. I'd never thought to do it. I mean, luckily, I've never had a problem, but I think I'll add that to my list now. But you mentioned the walk around check there. That's something I specifically do with my students. Maybe not always on the first couple of lessons, but, I get them to check the car before they get in it. It's interesting because now and again, they'll spot something. So on my car, there's a tiny dent just on the top of just sort of where the roof is. And I love it when they spot that for the first time because then they start to see, oh, right, I want to notice that I've had checked. And I had a student query me the other day. They were asking about why do I need to check before a lesson? I think they kind of got it in the head why they would check before, driving normally, but before a lesson. And I pointed out, look, if my front tire is damaged and then on your lesson, you go and bump the curb, I could get out and look and then blame you for that.
yeah.
So do you think that, look, I'm asking your opinion as someone that isn't a driving instructor, but do you think that getting that walk around check into the students on lessons is a good thing?
Well, yeah, because then it sets them up when they start driving themselves to always do a walk around check before they go anywhere. And it might sound daft that you should do it all the time, but even just once a week, once a month, just doing that walk around check to make sure that everything on your vehicle is safe could be the thing that stops you from unfortunately having a crash or breaking down or finding yourself in a position which kind of gives you anxiety, makes you feel uncomfortable, which obviously in our younger generation, they are a bit more kind of anxious over a lot of stuff. They have more social anxiety. So yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I do it with the kids. So if anyone's listening and has kids, I always get the kids involved and we have 20Ps and my little boy's 5, knows exactly what to be looking for. So if my little boy's 5 years old and knows what to be looking for with the 20P, you guys don't have any excuse. No.
That's a great comeback.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. I'm saving that clip and I'm using that with my students. Let's move on then, because I do think that's important. I'm not glad that happened to you, but I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to speak about it. But I do want to speak about you as a road safety campaigner, because as I mentioned before, I think a lot of instructors we teach road safety. That's kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. But the idea of campaigning for that or supporting for it can be a little bit alien. They don't know where to start. But I was thinking about the position you were in when you were started, and it was almost quite a similar one to a driving instructor. Because if we look at the safe system, you worked in tires and in the garage, so you worked around that safe vehicle aspect of the safe system. Whereas obviously as instructors, we work with learners, so we work around the safe driver. So we primarily focus on one of those components. But what you've done is you've now gone and embraced the whole kind of road safety sector, and you're campaigning for all sorts of stuff. And you're doing the road peace challenge, which I'm trying to get driving instructors in. And it seems like every time I turn on LinkedIn at the minute, you're working with someone else on something new. So I think the first thing I want to ask you is why that transition from kind of working solely in this garage sector and then going into garage anxiety, which I hadn't heard before. You mentioned it, by the way, and then going on to like everything. Why is that? Where's that transition come from?
I think for me, I was talking to the people who already knew what I was talking about. So all of the followers I had, which were from the garage sector, were embracing what I was doing and liked what I was doing and were starting to implement it in their garages. But then I was seeing the fact that, okay, I'm still speaking to people in my garage sector, but I'm not getting to these other sectors who need to understand about vehicle maintenance and tyre maintenance and just the general garage anxiety issues and stuff. So that's then why I started kind of branching out to the people. So obviously I did Project Edward. I went to the Young Driver Focus. Me and Ollie from Westco Tech hosted our road safety event, which opened up avenues to different fire services. So we've worked with Cheshire Fire and Rescue, Warwickshire Fire and Rescue, Lancashire Fire and Rescue, who are the people who kind of support the campaign for preventative maintenance, and we'll go out and do safety checks on vehicles, because I think people are a bit more receptive to the fire service than they are other services. And I think making the connections with all the other people, it's just kind of led me into it's just opened a massive door, basically. It's like Road Peace. Road Peace, the first charity that I actually started campaigning for, and I did that it was last February, and I raised £500 for Road Peace, and I ran 50 miles around the most dangerous roads in my area. And since then, I've kind of followed along what Road Peace is doing and stuff. And then this year, Rebecca said, please, will you, help us with the Road Peace Challenge, make us some social media content, because I don't think my content is too professional, but I think it's quite relatable because it's quite raw. I only do it off my phone. I want to be seen as somebody who's genuine and approachable. I don't want to be seen as somebody who's kind of putting on a persona for social media, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I think just making all these connections to people. And I mean, it's going to be announced today. I have actually just been nominated for 2 awards, and that is for the Best Community Initiative and Most Inspiring Female. So this will be announced as to whether I've won that on the 5th of June. But yeah, so that's hopefully going to be announced the 5th of June as to whether I've won that or not. So I think definitely putting my eggs in too many baskets, but at the same time, it's opened up so many different opportunities, and a lot of people are now learning a lot more from me, especially garage anxiety, because a lot of the garages are like, yes, that's what it is. That's the right word for it. And I found a survey done by Dick Lovett Group, which are a car sales group, and they did a survey on auto anxiety. And I've actually been in touch with them to say, love the survey. I've used it in so many different presentations now because it's so right. And yeah, auto anxiety and garage anxiety, I think because so many people can relate to it, that's why I've ended up with so many people connecting, if that makes sense.
I mean, firstly, congratulations on being nominated.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can vote anywhere, if it's a panel decide, but
I'll let you know.
I'm sure you definitely deserve it, because I kind of mentioned before, you're everywhere, and you're easily one of the most popular people that have come on podcasts, and you've done the Mega Night before and stuff like that. You're so relatable, and I think that ties into a little bit about what you were saying there about I'm not saying these words, you're saying these words, not always the most like professional content and very raw.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, because I think some people, so we'll talk about instructors here, are reluctant to do things for fear of it not being professional, for fear of, oh God, it doesn't look like this person's. What would you say to those people when you're almost doing the opposite, if that makes sense?
I would probably just say, just do it. And I know it's easy to say that, but I follow Accelerate with Kate. I love Accelerate with Kate because, again, raw videos, she is professional, but then again, it's just her, like, in the car, she's talking about different things. The same with, like, Vicky Folland as well. She does the same thing. It's just her sat in a car. It's raw. It's not a full-on professional camera. And I think it's so easy to make this content. And even if you just set yourself 2 hours, even in 1 week, just to make loads of little random videos. I mean, some of the videos I make, I'm not even in them. I make little stupid videos of like off CapCut, which is like a template, and it's like a dog popping into the camera, and then I put reminder, your MOT's due. Do you know, like just different stuff? Like people like stuff like that. And I think when people watch the videos and they think, oh, I could do that, you should do it and just do your first video. My first video was on my drive with my husband's van, and my little boy was holding the camera. And then since then, I mean, it's gone massive. So, you can do it if you really wanted to get into content creation and just make a few videos just to boost your profile. 100% just do it, and don't be afraid of what people say.
I think the other thing to say there, when we're talking about not being professional, we're not talking about not being good.
Yes. Yeah.
Your content is really good. And the thing is, it's got better. I'm sure you'll agree with this. From that first stuff you did, it's got better and better and better.
Yeah.
So we're more talking about not having a camera crew in the car with you that way.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing I want to bring in here as well is the stuff you do, the bulk of it is unpaid. The campaigning you do, it's you going around and making these videos. It's, all the stuff that you do, it's unpaid. And I think a lot of people don't always realize that, do they? They no, they'll expect you to reply or to comment or reply at certain times, or if there's a video that doesn't go up one day, why isn't she posted today, or that kind of stuff. Do you feel that pressure, and do you feel almost the that people appreciate that it's unpaid sometimes?
I think a lot of people don't realize I don't get paid for what I do. And I think that's the hardest part because people just expect me to go to events. They just expect me to turn up here. Can you just drive down to London and do this? Can you just come to Manchester and do that? And then when we have the conversation about, well, I'd need fuel covering. Oh, we can't really do that because of this. Well, I can't really come because I've got two children. I work full time and this is literally just a hobby that's turned into something massive. And I'm not saying it in a negative way against any of the companies who may have approached me to do stuff. It's just please realize that I do all this out of the goodness of my heart and to try and make sure our roads are safer for when my children grow up, other people's children grow up, just safer in general so that we don't have the worry of who's driving next to us and what state the car's in. So I think I'd love to get sponsored by someone who pays for it. And I'll tag them in all my videos. But yeah, no, I just do it because I want to make people aware that not everybody is safe. And, I just want people to be safe. And I guess I don't mind working with emergency services and stuff. I don't obviously ask them to pay me anything because at the end of the day, they are the guys that and girls that come and help us if we've been in a crash or anything, and to give back to them is really rewarding. But I think sometimes big companies just kind of expect you just to do stuff and not get paid for it. And I don't like when people give me deadlines because I'm not sticking to a deadline because you're not paying me for it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love what I do, but at the same time, I can't be everywhere.
We'll be back with more from Sophie in just a moment, but I want to give a quick shout out to some of the latest sign-ups to the Instructor Podcast Premium, and they are Rebecca, Angela, Jonathan Lowrys, Serhi, and Becky Seaton. So these guys have got access to a whole host of trainings from everything from coaching to mindfulness and standards check to business development and everything in between, as well as some really cool little benefits such as discounts on ADI and JC membership, Bob Morton's client-centered learning, and even the ADI PDI doctor. So if you want to check out more, head over to www.theinstructorpodcast.com. You can find out loads more over there, or you can find a link direct to it in the show notes. And just a reminder, you can sign up for a 3 weeks trial. And if at the end of that week you decide you don't like it, you can cancel and not pay a penny. But I'll be honest with you, most people stay. However, I also want to give another shout out to Bright Coaching, the sponsors of Season 7, and I am delighted that they've chosen to sponsor Season 7. And if you want to find out more about Bright Coaching, then head over to brightcoaching.net. You can find all the stuff there about their professional diploma, everything else they have to offer, and make sure you sign up to their newsletter, which includes a competition this month. So hang about to the end of the podcast to find out more about how you can win a 50% discount off of their professional diploma training course. But for now, let's get back into this episode. I think it's important that people realize that sometime as well, that if they are thinking about getting into becoming a road safety campaigner or campaigning for anything, a lot of that work is going to be unpaid. It's going to be free. And I saw a post by you recently that really resonated. I think you were talking about editing a video at like 11:30 at night. And I think I was editing a podcast at 11:30 at night when I read it. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds familiar. But I'm keen to ask you about the road safety community, because everyone that I speak to, almost literally everyone I speak to, mentions you. So how have you? Yes, like everyone. They say, you need to speak to Sophie Lydon. Do you know that fresh dry as was UK? I'm like, yeah, I do. I know. But how have you found the road safety community since getting involved in this? Sort of in particular, individuals within it.
I think I found it very welcoming. I've definitely found it a bit shocking that they only really think of Fatal 4 and Fatal 5 and don't take into account the tyre maintenance and vehicle maintenance, which is obviously what I talk about the most. But I also think sometimes it's kind of hard to get taken seriously. And again, I don't mean that in a negative way towards anyone, but I think it is very much like the tire industry, and it is kind of very male orientated as well. Yeah, any of like the females I've come across has always been like, "Oh, you're doing amazing, well done, can't believe you work in a garage, that's amazing." And I think it has been very welcoming, but sometimes there's a lot of challenges at the same time. I just think people probably think, "Oh, what's she talking about? She's clearly from a garage. She's just trying to promote her own business." When I'm actually not. I'm just trying to keep people safe. So yeah, it has been good. I mean, I've been welcomed by a lot of people, so I can't really say anything too bad.
No, it sounds similar to my experience in that everyone I've spoken to, or pretty much when I've spoken to, has been really helpful, really welcoming, like you said. But there's that little bit of you're a driving instructor. You stand over there at times, and that's what this podcast is about. That's what this is about. It's about bridging the gap, and it's
Mhm.
particularly I wanted to get you on to see how you've dealt with that. So those challenges that you just explained there, how have you dealt with them? Has it just been kind of head down, ass up, crack on, or have you found it particularly challenging? Or
I think I've just kind of worked out who I want to spend my time with and who I want to, work alongside, because a lot of people I'll go out of my way to host meetings with, talks and stuff. And I think because of my ADHD, we have spidey senses and we can always work out when somebody's clearly just there to either steal ideas or take the mickey out of you kind of thing. So I've definitely just keep myself to the people that I want to work with and spend time with. And I think I've kind of pushed a lot of people away who have purposely stolen a lot of my stuff that I've been and genuinely gone and opened up about and spoke about garage anxiety. I mean, other people are talking about how they started talking about garage anxiety when and I know nobody ever really spoke about it until I started talking about it. And I mean, years ago, this is how long it's been going on for. So years ago, I had a meeting with a big company and we talked about how I put two pictures on a screen, and one was a brand new pair of Converses and one was a dirty pair of Converses. And I used the analogy of young people, would you buy the brand new pair of Converses for £50, or would you buy the dirty pair of Converses for £35? And this is the same as when we talk about new tyres and part worn tyres. Well, this certain company stole that and put it into loads of billboards and signs and everything. I never got any credit for it. So it's been going on for so long now. I'm really hesitant. And because I'm such a lovely person as well, I just speak and I just open my mouth and I just talk about anything. And I feel like I need to remember not to, not everybody is my friend. So I think it has, over this past year, I have learned that, and I've learned, okay, no, these aren't for me. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to work with somebody else. So yeah, I think just making sure I do everything for me and my mission and not for other people is the way I did it. And I've kind of overcome the issues, really.
you know what? That's such a brilliant piece of advice, such a brilliant takeaway from this episode for me, because it is something I speak about a little bit as well. I'll get someone commenting saying, "Oh, I don't like this person. I don't want to work with them." I'm like, well, don't work with them then.
Mhm.
You get to choose who you work with. As an individual person and campaigner, that's one of the luxuries that you have, isn't it?
Mhm.
You get to choose who you work with, but it's half annoying when people steal your ideas, isn't it?
It's just annoying because I'm working so hard to talk about vehicle maintenance and tire maintenance. And my advice is honest and trustworthy advice because I am directly in the trade 5 days a week. So anything I talk about isn't off Google. It hasn't come from some information off a website. It hasn't come from the CEO or the director of that company that I'm then talking about it. It is literally just my personal experience and my advice and what I see on a day-to-day basis. So I think sometimes to see other companies pretending that they also know to talk about time maintenance and garage anxiety and things. I just think you're not within the trade. And obviously, everybody's entitled to speak about the issues I talk about. But it's just really upsetting for me sometimes when I see people doing it and they don't credit me when I know that it's come from me in the first place. So, I mean, I feel like I've been a right moany person on this podcast. But I think, you know, everybody has issues, don't they, at the same time? And I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But my main mission is to keep people safe, keep people aware that they need to have preventative maintenance on the cars. They need to be checking the tyre, they need to do oil and filter change, they need to be doing all that kind of stuff. And I don't want other people to take that away from me and claim it as their own. So yeah.
We can be we can be fairly confident that, within, I don't know, let's say a few weeks of this podcast going out, they'll be driving through somewhere releasing costs on tyre maintenance and stuff like that. I'm not crediting you. So there you go.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a note to get in touch with you to do that together. Anyway, but I like, do you know what? I don't think it's moaning. I think it's being honest and the honest appraisal of the situation, because you are a really positive, really enthusiastic person. Apparently, I've just done 10,000 steps.
Oh,
you are really
so much.
Yeah. But yeah, you are a really positive, enthusiastic person, but you're also realistic and you're honest, and stuff is going to bother you sometimes. So when you've got all this negativity, whether it's someone crashing into you or the people stealing your ideas, or maybe not even stealing, just like borrowing them and not crediting you, or then you get the hire car that's not up to scratch, and then the next one also isn't up to scratch as well. How do you keep going and keep doing this stuff?
Sometimes I just think, why am I still doing it? Because is anybody actually gaining anything? But then, like you've just said, people talk about me and people know who I am. And then sometimes I think, does anybody actually listen to me? Does anybody actually look at my videos? But then I think I've noticed that from just being me and these things happening to me, and from me just putting my little rants on LinkedIn and, talking about this shouldn't be happening, this is disappointing, my engagement has gone up by over 300%. And like a post I put on about International Women's Day on LinkedIn, I don't know if you saw that one, about how the guy didn't trust me with his car keys and asked where the men were. That got over 40,000 interactions on it. So I guess it is annoying when stuff happens, but the more I kind of voice myself and, talk about these things that are inconveniencing me, then it seems that more people kind of relate to what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think for me as well, I keep going because people are still being killed on our roads and people are still driving with bald tires, driving without brakes, metal on metal. And until that stops, I won't ever stop. And just by doing what I do, hopefully could reduce one person from crashing because they've thought about how they've got bald tires, so they're not actually going to leave the house today because actually, no, my car's not safe. And I think that's how I keep going, because I know that people need help and I know that people need information and educating. And hopefully in a few years' time, there'll be me in Parliament or something trying to make change for more more preventative measures on cars before you're allowed to drive away.
Prime Minister Sophie, I'll take
I know,
that.
yeah. But I couldn't deal with the drama now. I won't be able to do that.
I mean, look, it is interesting what you said at the start there as well about me saying about everyone speaks about you. It's something that I'm a big advocate of, is spreading the positivity and being honest. So, I sent you the clip the other week from the podcast of me and Ollie Taylor saying, and I think that we need to do more of that as people, because very, very quick to complain, but I think we need to actually make sure we're saying the good stuff as well. But yeah, I think as well, you mentioned about preventing deaths or preventing crashes, and we can't prove it, but you will have done. You will have had an impact where you have prevented someone from having a crash because they've heard what you've said and gone, I'm going to check my tyres, or I'm going to check my partner's tyres, or even with an instructor, I'm going to pass this on to my student because I've heard Sophie talk about it. And then that it's in that student's head. So we never necessarily know the impact you've had, but you've had an impact somewhere. So yes, I'm pleased you keep going. But I want to ask you about where we could start. So if someone was sat there now and thinking, I want to get involved more in road safety and campaigning, and I accept that a lot of this will be done off my own back and free, what advice would you give, or where would you suggest they start?
I think work out what your kind of niche may be in the sector. So I think we don't have to have a niche to campaign for road safety, but I think trying to work out maybe what in your community, in your area, is the biggest issue. So for me, I first started talking about the speed of people driving around on our, outside the garage, on the road outside our house. And then that's when I started talking about like Fatal 4, Fatal 5, and then realised there was nobody talking about tyres and vehicle safety. So, which is why I then started campaigning for that. So I think working out in your area what the issues are is definitely one place to start, because the people in your area will then relate to what you're saying, and then it'll start moving further afield. So if I was going to start again here, I would probably talk about the amount of people who are driving whilst under the influence of cannabis, because every single car you drive past in Morecambe or Lancaster stinks of cannabis, and there's not enough being done about it. But again, that's not in my kind of, I don't understand enough about it. I wouldn't even know where to start. So that would be, that would probably be where I would have started again. So I think just being brave, because I've talked about in our community about doing speed watch, getting people involved, and I've had a lot of flack for it, being called a grass, being called a busybody, when realistically people are speeding every single day. Like the person that sped straight to the back of me on Tuesday because he was on his phone, he stunk of cannabis, and he was speeding and he crashed into the back of us and we were stationary. So clearly there is that issue here. So I think it is just being brave, because getting involved in the road safety sector, when you start speaking to public, a lot of people will kind of give you good feedback. They'll enjoy what you're doing, but there is also that group of people who love to be keyboard warriors, who love to give you the negative side of it. But you have to kind of overcome that and just realize that what you're doing is actually helping people and keeping people safe. So I definitely just say, just do it, or get involved. If you've got a road safety partnership, ask how you could volunteer to help and support them. If you've got the council, if they have a road safety sector, ask how you could volunteer, support them. Do your own research, make your own videos on your area. That's how I started anyway.
I'm interested to see if your experience has been the same as mine a little bit, in that I found that doing this stuff, there's a lot of people that have gone, yeah, it's great that you're doing it, but that's all you get. You don't get a, how can I help? You don't get a, I'm going to help by doing this. You just get a, oh, it's great that you're doing it, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. I think for me, having a husband who's a firefighter who goes to RTCs, and then meeting people like Sharon Huddleston, listening to their story. I've met some other people who've tragically lost people. For me, it's so personal now. So when people say, oh, it's great what you're doing, I then go, yeah, but did you know that this is happening? Do you know that this is happening? And don't you think that you could make a change? Don't you think you could do this? And it definitely resonates with my friends now, although they might be slightly taking the mickey out of me at the same time. They all go, oh God, here she comes, road safety woman, get your seatbelt on. But again, it's funny for me because I know that a lot of all of my friends, they all say, you're doing amazing, well done to you. I couldn't do it because I don't know what I'm talking about, which is a lot of people's issues. But also a lot of them will be like, oh, she's coming, better make sure you're strapped in, don't be speeding, don't be doing this, don't be on your phone. And I think if it makes a difference in like my group of friends already, then I bet they speak about to other people and posting it on social media. And there's people that I've not spoken to for years who messaged me on Instagram to say, oh, you're doing amazing. I've been watching in the background. Well done. And I guess until something awful happens to them, then they might then start getting involved. But it's just that awful. And I also think, sorry, I've made this really long, so you can copy it if you need to. I also think because it doesn't directly affect them, they're not interested. So say with like tyre safety, I talk about tyre safety and vehicle maintenance. If people can't be honest listening to me, they'll just be like, oh, it's not my problem. I'm not bothered. I don't have a car. I'm not interested. So I think sometimes as well, when it comes to road safety, I think because people are like, oh, it's got nothing to do with me. I don't need to get involved. That's also like you struggle too.
It's a really interesting point. It was similar to a point that you mentioned Sharon Huddleston there. She was on the podcast and she made the point that before what happened to Caitlin, she wasn't thinking about that stuff. She wasn't aware of it. It wasn't at the forefront of her mind. It just wasn't there. But after it's happened, she's now campaigning for it. And I think that's, as you say, it's part of the problem in it, that there's so many people, because it's never happened to them, it doesn't register. And I must admit that it became personal for me when I first started looking into road peace. So this was back at the start of the year, I think. And it was the memorial page on the road peace website.
Yeah.
And it was just seeing all those people that I'd never put a face to it before.
Mhm.
And I can remember getting quite emotional seeing that website. And I spoke to Rebecca Morris about that. And I think that was the part that went for me, yeah, I need to do something. Because
Yeah.
it resonated. But speaking of Road Piece, you are taking part in the Road Piece Challenge, which is in May. I think it's the 13th to the 19th.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're doing.
Oh, well, I said I was going to cycle 176.6 kilometers on a stationary bike. But then when I was with Cheshire Fire and Rescue last week, Ryan Swindles was like, you do realize how hard that's going to be. Do you cycle anyway? I was like, no. So at the moment, I'm just I've organised to possibly, I think Cheshire Fire and Rescue are setting off from here at the garage and cycling back to Winsford, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. And I was going to join in with them. So I'm going to cycle so far with them, cycle back, and then walking with the Transport of Greater Manchester and the rest of the people that are going to be there on the Thursday, I think it is, at Heaton Park. I think that's right. Could be wrong again. I'm not sure. I forget everything. But I'm going to go there, make some content with them about what they're doing, how they're raising money, how many people have come to walk and stuff. And I'm hopefully going to try and do some other bits at the garage. And I am going to try and cycle as much as I can, but I'm mainly just kind of flitting here, there, and everywhere throughout the week just to make sure we've got plenty of content covering the whole week and making sure people are aware of what Road Peace actually do. I've had a few people now that have come into the garage who have tragically either lost somebody or been left with life-changing injuries. And I had my Road Peace t-shirt on, I think it was last week or the week before, and a lady came in and she was asking all about my t-shirt. And I said, oh, it's Road Peace, the national charity for road crash victims and everything. So we got into the story of how her husband had been seriously injured 6 months previous on the A590, which has left him disabled, unable to walk, and has had to retire from work due to it. And it was non-fault. Someone crashed into him. And I think for me, just being able to now speak to people, like, I know I'm not a qualified therapist, I'm not trying to say I've been giving them advice, but, just having, I think she was very grateful that there was somebody there that kind of understood things about road crashes, and I was from the charity and she had no idea they existed. So she took all the details off my shirt and, she said that she was going to ring them because she said her husband had been really struggling and needed some support. And I spoke to a gentleman in a pharmacy a few weeks ago. He tragically lost his daughter a few years ago. The boyfriend was drunk and she was in the passenger seat and he crashed into a central reservation and she died. So I think now people are openly coming and speaking to me about that. I don't know. It's strange for me because I never thought that I would ever end up being someone who's seen as, oh, I could speak to her about that because she does this. So even if I might not be doing a lot on the Road Peace Week, I will be at the same time because I'll be telling people stories, helping people get across what they want to talk about. And even if it's not directly, if it's just them speaking to me and then me making videos about how this person has tragically lost someone, just to get people to think again before they get in the car, then yeah, that's what I'm aiming to do that week.
And you'll be doing more than 99% of people, so that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, that's very true.
We currently try to get driving instructors involved to each instructor to walk 5 miles a day, which doesn't necessarily sound like a lot, but when you're in a car for 12 hours a day, it does.
Yeah.
And that's proving challenging. But either way, I want to ask you, what's next? What's next for you?
I've got lots of big ideas on the horizon, potentially already being created. I've signed some NDAs this week, which is very interesting. Obviously, cannot disclose, with different companies who never thought I would ever get approached by. So that will all be coming out sort of in the next few months. And yeah, I don't know what's next really. I'm trying to work out where to go from what I'm doing now. My aim was to get around all the fire services in the UK to educate them on what they should actually be looking for when they do their vehicle checks, if the service does them, and to basically try and train and teach as many people as possible about tyre safety, even if it's just a quick 20-minute session on a webinar, or if it's me going to that venue and, speaking about what they should be looking for just themselves and getting their own car or their fleet or anything like that. that is my aim, to be seen as the person that people come to for any information to do with tyres, really. But yeah.
Anything else you want to speak about today? Any other points you want to get across?
I feel like there probably was, but can't really think, to be honest.
Well, as always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I always enjoy our chats, and I know our listeners do too. So a big thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Actually, one last thing. If you are getting behind the wheel of a vehicle, please make sure you have done your checks, and that is tyres, which is tread, pressure, any foreign objects in the tread. Make sure you check your wipers, make sure you've got screen wash, and make sure you're just safe generally yourself to be driving and wherever you're going. And let's all be safe on our roads.
I like it. And what a good note to finish on.
Yeah.
So a big thank you to Sophie Lydon for joining me on today's show. Always a pleasure to speak to Sophie. And as always, she spoke some real smart stuff. Particularly like the phrase she used that I didn't pick up on at the time, if I'm being honest, was, I was asking her why she kind of approached the whole sector rather than just hers. And she spoke about the people that she was talking to already knew what she was talking about. So she wanted to reach a new audience. And I just thought, what a remarkable way to look at it. What a lovely way to look at it. And that's something we can do as well. When we talk to our learners, often they'll know what we're talking about. We spend a lot of time with them. So we can reach out to the audience via our social media, via connecting with parents and reaching out to schools or whatever we want to do. We can talk to more people than just our learners. And I thought it was a real key takeaway that I actually annoyed myself listening back that I didn't pick up on at the time, because I'd like to dig into that a bit more. But either way, there you go. Big thank you for Sophie, as always. But I also want to give a shout out to Bright Coaching and thank them for sponsoring Season 7. I say it every week, but genuinely chuffed to have someone the caliber of Bright Coaching sponsoring Season 7 of the podcast. And they've currently got a little competition on. So on April the 30th, they are going to be announcing a winner who will get a 50% discount off of their professional diploma in coaching, behavioural change, and driver psychology. So you'll be saving over £800. So to enter this competition, all you have to do is to sign up to their newsletter. Head over to brightcoaching.net, sign up to the newsletter, and you will get entered into the draw. If you are already in their newsletter, then you don't need to sign up. You're already in the draw. So a chance for you to win a 50% discount on their professional diploma there. That's brightcoaching.net. Also, just want to take a moment to shout out the Instructor Podcast Premium. Now, you've heard Sophie today, and you heard Sophie talking a little bit about the walk-around checks around the car and tyre maintenance. Well, just to announce that we've agreed for Sophie to come on and deliver an expert session around those very topics. So she's going to come on and deliver a presentation to my Instructor Podcast Premium members in June. So we've just had 2 in April. We had Lee Sperry doing a presentation on lesson planning, and then we had Chris Spencer doing a live Q&A on lesson planning, and then we have got Sophie coming up with that expert session as well. So some real quality stuff going over there. So go and check out the website, www.theinstructorpodcast.com. You can find out more on it over there. So sign up to the £10 tier, where you get all the pre-recorded shows. That's everything on coaching and mindfulness, mental health, standards check part 3, all those kind of trainings. Or sign up to the £22 tier, where you get everything in the lower tier, plus all the live and interactive stuff. So that's expert sessions, watching shows being recorded live Q&As, plus 4 live Zooms a month with me, where you can come on and get some coaching, get your problem solved. That's 4 times a month that I deliver those sessions. Now, that tier, the £22 tier, is currently capped at 75 people, and I think there's only 9 spaces left at the time of recording. So go sign up so you can get access to all of the expert sessions. There's currently 9, and we've got another bunch scheduled for the remainder of the year. So all that's left to me to say is to say thank you for listening, and let's just keep raising standards.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
I hope you're doing okay. Like, genuinely. There's a lot of shit out there at the minute, and Yeah, it's not always the most pleasant of worlds. I hope you're doing okay. Look after yourself.